I just got a new heater today. I'm already affected by the tariffs.
How is that, Richard?
The parts are, they say, up 8 to 10% already, just in parts for the heater. So I ended up getting a new heater. But
the company told you that? The company that you bought it from?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they passed on that 8 to 10% to you. So you paid an extra. Okay.
Yeah, and this is for every kind of part from outside the country, and no matter what it is. I mean, that includes everything that comes to the United States, to these tariffs that he's imposed, just like in 30 days.
Jesus. Lisa Paris of LaGrange, KY, Kentucky, and her husband were expecting a market reset within the next year, but we're still surprised by the sluggish economy or economic performance during the first months of Trump's return to office. The couple have lost $70,000 in retirement savings since January. It's going to hurt a little bit to heal correctly, 58-year-old Paris said, comparing Trump's treatment of the economy to splitting a broken bone with a splint. If you don't set the bone, you're going to get a wobbly healing, and it's not going to be strong. If you set it, it's going to hurt, but it will be stronger than it was before. Wow. He plans to work 10 to 15 years before retiring from his job as an internal medicine physician. Still, the 53-year-old is hoping that Trump's tariff threats don't extend past the short term. Williams, who voted for Trump in November, has taken steps to diversify his portfolio, which included buying gold, a traditionally defensive asset. I'm a believer that you don't make rash decisions based on short-term volatility in a market, he said. I'm hoping that's what this is going to be. Williams said he would be alarmed if Trump's tariffs or threats of tariffs against trade partners like Mexico and Canada escalated to a full-on trade war. He's holding out hope that the tariff announcements are a negotiating tactic that will ultimately benefit Americans. Grew up with a Glenn Beck-loving constitutionalist and Mormon mother. Showed her this picture, and her first rationalization was, it's not real. I pointed out the official White House page posted it. Her excuse, it's only to push people's buttons. Paste. Citizens of this particular country have to figure out a way to let things play out and not have hatred in our hearts for each other. Compassion and love is all we've got, because the house divided between itself will fall. Really, I don't believe that, and you shouldn't either. This is just factions of government trying to keep us divided so that they keep power. So I looked at the picture. I figured it was a magazine and I blew it off. I don't believe you said anything about it being from the White House at the time. If it is from the White House, it's stupid that they're doing stuff like that. It's only to push people's buttons. But no, I think it's wrong, stupid, and unhelpful. Meh.
This is going to be the Trump golden age of prosperity miracle, and it's much bigger than Ronald Reagan ever dreamed of or imagined, and it's going to be that much better. Salute to Ronald Reagan, but really salute to the commander-in-chief right now.
This is pretty wild. So Trump did this, and this, and I think these are all like objectively horrible and illegal and terrible things. Don't you agree? Yeah. Okay, well then why would you still support? Also, I think for all three people I've spoken to, not only did they say they would have preferred Trump to Kamala, but all of them said that they wouldn't change their mind today. And it's like, why? Well, wokeism. Okay.
I've had a number of people reach out and ask why it seems like the current administration has abandoned Ukraine and our commitments to NATO. First, the U.S. cuts off arms sales. Now they're restricting intelligence access to NATO. Now, it took me a while, but I did speak with some people with knowledge of the administration. I also spoke with some people in the intelligence community, people who are apolitical the way many of us intel guys are, because, when you work in intelligence, even as a contractor, you literally can't be political. You give advice to whoever is in power. They deserve the best intelligence and the best analysis without any kind of political bias.
Okay, just as a quick thing. So I hear people say this a lot. Like, oh no, like when you work in the military, when you work in intelligence, oh, you're not supposed to be political. Like you can't talk about your opinions, blah, blah, blah. I hear this. It sounds like some shit where it's like, okay, I'm sure that they say that, but I'm sure that like everybody knows or whatever, right? I've had so many people email me that apparently when you work in these orgs, when you work in the military, when you work in the CIA, like nobody talks about politics. It's just like, it's considered like super faux pas. I don't know if anybody else has any different perspectives on that, but that is true. That apparently people just don't talk politics in these places, and you don't really know what people think or whatever. I guess maybe there might be an exception to that, but I've gotten so many different people from military and from intelligence services that have like emailed me saying more or less the same. So I think that's true.
The next time I go to Europe, I'm going to use Saley. See, you download the Saley.
Don't we want people to actively go against Trump? Isn't this harder? People don't speak about politics. The problem is you have to be really careful not to give the impression of impropriety. Remember, Peter Strzok was kicked from an investigation for the appearance of impropriety, and people use that to attack the Mueller investigation Trump did by saying, oh, look, these, all these guys are out to get me because they hate me personally. When just because Peter Strzok had texted, I think he was talking to somebody and on his phone, he had texted like, oh, don't worry. Like, we wouldn't let somebody like Trump, like, take the office because Trump was shitting on all of our military and all of our all of our federal workers at the time. But that message, the Republicans tried to basically wield that message claiming, look, see, he's biased. He hates Trump. All of our intelligence just hate Trump. That's why they're going after him so much. So you have to be really careful for that. With the book we're reading, I think what stands out as a difference between 20th century and 21st century fascism is that modern day fascists aren't nearly as violent. They talk a bunch of shit, rarely do anything violent. That's true. I need to be so careful on my timelines. But I think there are a couple of huge differences. So for World War I, Germany just came out of a big war. I think that, this is so hard to quantify, but Europe's relationship with violence is probably going to feel a lot different than America's relationship with violence, just because in Europe, you're fighting oftentimes like on your territory, or like people are going to war and coming back in countries that, you could train or drive to in 2 hours. Like the violence in the war and everything is so much more like in your face, I would imagine. And obviously there was a lot more conflict and violence. So the societies might be a bit more prone to it, like coming right out of World War I. And then for Germans in particular, there was that, you've got so much going on after the war, right? Your parts of the territory had literally been stripped from Germany. What part of Germany was considered the Rhineland? Like, I know you had that cut up where Prussia was in order to, give Poland access to is it the North Sea? I don't know what's up there north of Germany. For a while, the French came in and they occupied part of the Ruhr in order to basically extract as much money from them as they could to pay off the war reparation shit. The inflation was starting, like the hyperinflation, and that was like super duper bad. So, I mean, there were the conditions in post-World War I Germany were really, really brutal for a variety of reasons. Like we read that one passage where a guy would go to buy a coffee in the morning and he would pay for it. You have to pay for the coffee right as you got it, because if you wait to pay until afterwards, it might be like 3 times more expensive. Like, it seems like the Democrat strategy is to not be too vocal and let the Republicans make themselves look bad. What do you think about this? I thought it was a bad idea. I still kind of think it's a bad idea, but it might be a good idea. I don't know. I guess I can understand maybe the thinking where if it is the case, like, I mean, it's back to that old adage, if it's the economy, stupid. Like, if they do things to fuck with the markets and the economy, people will notice and they will lose. That's just a fact. There's no escaping that reality. However, I'm just a fan of like causing moments where you have the camera on you and then capitalizing on those moments. But I guess there's a world where the Republicans are fucking up and people don't notice the Republicans are fucking up because the Democrats are taking too much of the spotlight. I don't know. It's a hard answer. Or it's a hard question, I guess, a difficult question, because you could always see things going either way.
Now, I'm going to start with an uncomfortable truth. A lot of what we see in Ukraine today is a result of 3 things. The botched pullout from Afghanistan, the previous administration never making a strong case for supporting Ukraine, and slow-walking weapons shipment.
Fuck, holy shit, I super disagree with all 3 of these. I don't think the pullout from Afghanistan had anything to do with Russia's decision to. Russia was always invading Ukraine if they weren't able to just completely dominate in the Donbass. I think that was always happening. No strong cases for Ukraine's support. I feel like the U.S. made the strongest case they could, but we're divided so much. Republicans just weren't on board with it. I feel like it's a difficult position to be in. How can the U.S. leader make a case to the world when half of our population at home is brainwashed on some like anti-Ukrainian Russian propaganda shit? For slow walking arms to Ukraine, I go back and forth on this. And I know that nowadays we really want to criticize the administration for slow walking arms to Ukraine. And I go back and forth, like, yeah, we probably should make things available sooner, or maybe not. One argument, I don't remember if this was brought up on stream or if somebody emailed me. One argument, though, is that we really didn't know how Ukraine would perform during the war. Like, nobody really had any expectations or understandings of how protracted the conflict could get. And the idea that in the beginning, if we would have shipped a ton of weapons to Ukraine immediately, and then they lost in 2 like weeks anyway, and then Russia takes all those arms, and it's like, okay, wait, why did we do this? Everybody would be looking at us going like, excuse me, why did you think Ukraine would ever have a chance to beat Russia in war? Why do you think the Ukrainian military would be able to utilize your weapons? Why did you think you'd be able to, like, Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in Eastern Europe for how long? Why would you just unlock your whole military to them? Are you retarded? That's what people would be saying now. So I'm sympathetic to waiting like a little bit just to see how they could use them. Although I do agree at some points it became like very cucked, like not allowing them to strike into Russian territory, for instance, was retarded, I think. But yeah.
And you can like that or not. You can threaten to unsubscribe. I've heard it all. I'm just a messenger. And the truth is that I'm going to talk to you the same way I talk to my clients who pay me money to say this stuff. I've had clients threaten to leave too, but they always seem to keep writing the checks. So here's the hard truth. There is no reason why we should have left Afghanistan. I know people love to scream, endless wars, but we were fine in Afghanistan. In the 17 months before we left, the U.S. had zero combat deaths. The Afghan military was holding the line. All they needed was American air support, advisory, and technical expertise. And I get it. Our administration at the time said, oh, our hands are tied because of the deal. The Taliban broke the deal multiple times. We still left.
The issue, in my opinion, is, I mean, people call it mission creep. We just didn't have a clear goal in Afghanistan. I think that was always the problem. Like, okay, you don't want to leave Afghanistan because you think we can make a better government than the Taliban. Sure, maybe. But that wasn't the original mission in Afghanistan. And I don't know if anybody really had a clear idea of what the mission in Afghanistan even was. Was the goal to make it a mini democracy or a democratic country in the Middle East with indefinite support from the United States forever? Was that really, truly the goal? I don't know if everybody would have been on board with that. I don't know if even our own military thought that was the goal. So, I mean, that's, yeah.
And when we did, I guarantee you President Putin was watching. Because what he saw was America cutting and running when our allies needed us the most. It didn't matter if it made strategic sense to stay. It didn't matter if Afghanistan gave us another permanent foothold against China.
Wasn't the goal just keeping stability in the area? I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question. I don't think anybody knows what the fuck the goal was.
We left, and we left our allies to die. And I think that planted a little seed in President Putin's head. All he needed to do was keep up the pressure, use propaganda and useful idiots to make Ukraine the bad guy, and the U.S. would cut and run from Ukraine and Europe just like we did in Afghanistan. Now, the current administration sees what's happening through the lens of grand strategy. And you might not like this perspective, but I believe this is the perspective, and it's a very calculated risk. Since 2016, the United States has told Europe to get its defensive act together. They haven't. Since 2014, we've told Europe, stop buying Russian gas. They bought more. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, many NATO countries wrung their hands instead of acting decisively. Some still can't find 2% of their economy to put towards the military, and it's been 3 years. And I don't believe a single new munitions factory has been built in Europe since the war started. That's kind of on them. So part of this is the administration saying, no more free rides. China is rising. The U.S. needs to shift its focus to the Pacific. And
do you think the idea that propping up Afghanistan and nation building into democracy fell flat because there wasn't much point when Israel already existed? No, I think it fell flat because we just never knew what we were doing there. I feel like a lack of clear direction for what the goal even is a big problem.
Ukraine got caught in the middle of realpolitik. Back in 1862, Abraham Lincoln wrote to newspaper editor and abolitionist Horace Greeley, where he said, if I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. That, in a nutshell, is what is happening to Ukraine and Europe right now. The administration's position seems to be, if we can deter China without saving Ukraine, we will. If we can deter China by saving Ukraine, we will. And if we can deter China by letting Russia take some of Ukraine, we will. Because to the current administration, China is the real threat. President Xi has told the PLA to be ready by 2027 to take Taiwan by force. They're already building the landing ships. And right now, the U.S. has about 84,000 troops stationed in Europe, including an armored brigade in Bulgaria that isn't very useful for fighting China. So what happens if Europe takes the driver's seat? Well, then the 173rd Airborne could come home, or maybe to a permanent base like the Philippines. Some of our light and airborne units that are on rotation can come back to the U.S. or maybe head over to Asia. Maybe we keep one armored brigade on a rotation in Europe. You know, for the longest time, I have said that Russia literally can't stop this war, because the second they do, their economy collapses. Worst case scenario is that the war goes on and Russia breaks up into a bunch of feuding warlord states that just so happen to have nuclear weapons. The last time Russia collapsed was in 1991. It was manageable, and back then we called it the Soviet Union. But today, the administration may be calculating that a collapsing Russia plus a rising China equals disaster. So the current administration might think that it is better to force Ukraine into a peace deal, even if it isn't good for Ukraine, remove sanctions on Russia, let Russia soft land so that Putin is still in power and the nuclear weapons are safe, you have no warlord states, and then pivot everything to China. That is a strategy, but here's the problem. Our batting average at defending liberty sucks right now. As Americans, that's supposed to be our jam. You know, we hung the Kurds out to dry, we left our Afghan partners to die, and now we're walking away from Ukraine and maybe Europe. So if you're Taiwan, the Philippines, Japan, Korea, Australia.
Yeah, I'm going to say that, like, and I love my Ukrainian friends, and I think that abandoning Ukraine is wrong, even in this type of strategic environment, if everything he was saying was true. But where is the administration's commitment then to the allies that we should already have, right? Like, if the goal is to gear up for some kind of protracted conflict with China, why aren't we doing everything we can to shore up our alliances with Mexico and Canada or the rest of Europe? Like, there are ways that you can do this that don't involve you setting on fire every single positive relationship you have. I don't see any benefit whatsoever to this. And like, it's one thing if you're a dumb American and you think that the president tweeting shit is just like epic and based and it doesn't matter. But to the rest of the world, your words matter. Words do matter. What you say matters, and how you treat people matters. And the idea that the president can just constantly chastise and scream at and belittle and patronize and condescend to all these European countries and then expect them to just be chilling on your side. Like, these countries are all, for better or for worse, they're all democracies. And the people in these countries see those statements. You know, it might be that you think that like Canadians booing Americans at hockey games is just kind of like fun memes for Reddit. But remember, Canadians vote for their leaders. And if the leaders see that the population is not happy with America, and the population is voting on the fact that they're not happy with America, then the leaders aren't going to do things that are nice towards America. Like, these things matter. It feels retarded that I even have to say this, but like, yeah, you can't treat people like shit and expect them to stick around for you.
Can you trust the U.S.? Because right now it seems like the answer is no. Because if we can turn off weapons aid to Ukraine, we can turn off aid to anyone.
Also, a lot of people are posting in chat that apparently Europe has increased its ammunition manufacturing, but...
And alliances, they only work if we're consistent. The scary part to me is that I could see Europe or even Five Eyes countries stopping the sharing of intelligence with the United States because they're afraid that this intelligence is either inadvertently or intentionally going to be leaked to Russia. And it's scary because we need our partners to get information for us from people who won't necessarily give it to us. The other issue here is weapon systems are expensive, and they get cheaper when large orders are placed. So when our allies order weapon systems from the United States,
and everybody's using the same systems,
it's easier to keep the production lines open when other countries purchase our weapons. But if we break that trust, if we threaten to turn orders off on a whim, why would anyone ever buy weapon systems from us again? This is
one of the reasons too. This is why I don't even have these conversations because conservatives don't even defend Trump policy. So it feels like a weird waste of time because I don't even know who I'm arguing with. But like, let's say that Trump really, truly did want to bring manufacturing back to America. Okay. Everybody knows my position on this. It's stupid. But let's say that he really did want to do that. There are effective ways to do that. And there are stupid ways to do that. Right. An effective way would be with a real, actual, bilateral trade agreement with another country, or with multilateral trade agreements establishing that manufacturing will be back in America, or setting some local economic agenda that includes permanent tariffs that would protect manufacturing in America, or at least the kind that maybe Canada had with certain quotas being met. These would be things that would lead to an increase in investment in manufacturing in the United States. Even if I think that's stupid, that would work. But the tariff on and off, people just don't understand how cancerous uncertainty is in a business environment, in any environment. Nobody wants uncertainty. It's so bad. It's such a horrible thing for everybody. Like, Trump keeps thinking that people are going to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Who the would invest hundreds of billions of dollars in a country that might turn on or off tariffs on the whim of whoever the U.S. president is during the same U.S. presidency, right? What? Like, it's such a stupid approach. Even if you wanted to protect local industry, it's such a stupid way to do it.
Not only hurts the U.S. and the defense industry, it also makes our weapon systems more expensive in the long run. And ultimately, we build less stuff. The United States is at a crossroads. Are we the nation that stands up for liberty, or are we the nation that walks away when it's inconvenient? Because if we keep proving to the world that we're unreliable, that we'll cut and run when things get tough, why would anyone ever stand with us when we need them? Taiwan is watching, the Philippines are watching, Japan is watching, South Korea and Australia, they're all watching. And what happens the moment they think that a deal with China is better than a deal with the U.S.?
Yep.
If we keep signaling...
But the problem is we take that for granted. We just take it for granted. Why would a country ever sign with China or Russia over the United States? Why would you ever do that? Clearly nobody would ever do that, right? We just take it for granted because in the past there really was no reason to, but you're giving people a reason to reconsider, and it's just unbelievable. For no reason. Nothing has happened.
We're willing to trade our allies for short-term strategic convenience, then we need to ask ourselves one final question. Who's going to stand with us when we're the ones in need?
Hi, I'm Canadians. I understand the 30% tariffs on dairies thing is kind of true. Somehow, I think it might not be as much of a deal as Trump says. Why is the 30% tariffs on dairies is much less trouble than a 20% tariffs on steel, for example? So I believe that the way that it works is in some markets, what you do is in order to make it so that your local manufacturing is not being completely destroyed, you have a quota set so that if so much of another country's exports are taking over a part of your market, then you start to bump tariffs up in order to make it so that your local manufacturing or your local production is still alive, basically. Now, to be clear, this year, the U.S. hasn't tripped any of those quotas at all for Canada. So there is no 250% tariff right now on dairy for anything in Canada. But some people will have things that, like, let's say that you're starting to import I'm in guesswork here, but my guess is, let's say that you find that you can import every single year all of your dairy from the United States. Well, your own dairy manufacturing is just going to stop. Your farmers go, okay, well, this is fucking retarded. Why the fuck am I going to bother making anything? But then let's say there's a year or two where there's like a dairy crisis, a whole bunch of cows, fuck themselves to death or something. And now America's like, ooh, sorry, we're drinking all our milk, get fucked. Well, Canada can't just spin up a dairy industry immediately. Now they have no milk at all. They have no dairy products. They're fucked. Now, these types of tariffs that are like quota-based, they were already negotiated with Canada. Like, this was part of the U.S.-Mexico Canada trade agreement. We'd already negotiated these. We were fine with these. Trump already negotiated these. These were fine. They were already built into the trade. So no, there aren't like an automatic 250% tariff. There isn't an automatic huge tariff on all the dairy stuff. These were just quotas that if they'd imported too much from the United States, they would eventually turn on. Lex has already deleted tweet. Great news today. Ball is in Putin's court now, hoping for possible ceasefire in Ukraine soon. Good one. If Ukraine really did attack Twitter, I think the only logical thing is for Elon to sign a ceasefire immediately, give them half of Twitter, and make sure he says thank you. But hey, stand true. Hey, Grok, who was better for the economy in the last 30 years? Republicans or Democrats? It's World War II. Democrats have outperformed Republicans on the economy. Rip.
The men and women on this committee are good people. They're honest and caring people. And that's why I do not understand why you would relegate this committee to no longer being of significance and resort to saying you will do whatever Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet when we look at the empty seats here, where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he found are so evident, why isn't he here explaining it?
They never, ever, ever do that. They never have to have their people testify. It's only Democrats. It's only Hillary Clinton for 11 hours. It's only Hunter Biden if they think they can get him on a crime. It's only Democrats that have to come and testify over and over and over and over again. It's only Zuckerberg and them when the Republicans think they've done something wrong, but never when they're on their side. They never, ever, ever have to come and testify if they're being accused by the Democrat side of things. It's so unbelievably unhinged.
You know why? Because he's out to privatize Social Security. He's been on television the last couple of days talking exactly about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and what he intends to do. Privatize it. The American people, some of them may have been born at night, but not last night. People are aware of this. Every single one of your districts, all the money that comes in monthly, and you as a Congress, have not done anything in more than 54 years. And now you have someone coming in to privatize a system, something you have longed to do going back to 1982, because Elon Musk thinks that this is the best thing to do. President Trump has called Social Security a scam. Elon Musk, as the chairman, as Mr. Neal said, called it a Ponzi scheme. Ask that of the people in your district. Ask that, Mr. Smith, of the more than 198,000 people in your district who rely on Social Security, and you won't even let the person who's planning to privatize it, who's telling the big lie in front of everyone, bold as he possibly can, saying, this is what we're going to do. The Congress is in our back pocket. We don't even have to come before them and testify because we control the House, we control the Senate, and we control the presidency. And it's the tyranny of the executive. It's why these resolutions were first adopted back in 1789, because the founding fathers knew that the executive branch does not have total authority over the legislature unless you have a willing party that says, no, we're going to do exactly what you tell us to do, Mr. Musk and Mr. President. It doesn't matter to our constituents. It doesn't matter how much money they are not going to receive. We're not even going to tell them the truth about what's going to happen to them. And every single one of these districts where they're being shut down and their personnel, and as Mr. Neal said, then after you cut and eliminate the people, say the agency isn't responding accordingly. No other agency operates for under less than 1%. With that, they administer to over 70 million people in the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and children. Shame! Shame! Can't bring people in front of this body? If he's right, if they're so good, if they're so just, why aren't they here telling the American people about it? They're not, because you know the truth. It's about privatization. I yield back.
Rip.